computer. So, hello everybody.
If we agree, huh?
If you push the button, you agree with it, yes.
Yes, because
Okay.
this is a legal meeting, huh? This one.
Yeah, it's a legal meeting. Okay, thank you, Rob Pereira. Everybody who is present, I will give notice on my presentation in a minute, but this meeting will be recorded and will be published on our broadcasting ADHD Europe channel on YouTube. So I am Hans van der Velde. I'm here as Vice President of ADHD Europe, but also as the Chair of the Dutch Science Committee of the Dutch Association for People with ADHD and Dyslexia. And I will do the kickoff, Miriam, if you're okay, with the, let's say, the Dutch situation. And here it is. I will inform you about our experiences of the last years. So this meeting will be recorded, as I said, and it will be published. And here is my update. Well, it happens that the last week, something really legally interesting happened. Medici, a pharmaceutical, wrote us, well, a kind of threatening, for us it was threatening email to the Dutch Association Impuls and Woordblind, that we have to remove certain information we published on the website about, we call free Dex, dexamphetamine, which is not as expensive as the one that Medici is selling. It's a complicated story, never mind, but it's information mentioning a certain medication, in this case, dexamphetamine. And they say this is advertising and it's prohibited, etc. Whoa, everybody frightened. So is this information or is it advertising? Since I have a legal background, that's why I participate in this meeting, I looked it up and I saw the European guidelines.
Ja, oder Otto, schreibt doch mal auf, Herr Bauer.
I saw the European guidelines, and there is indeed regulation about making advertisement about medications. And what I saw is that if you mention the medical product, indirect or direct, the European regulation says that the national government has to decide about that, and the Dutch legislator, the government, has not adapted a certain paragraph because, and here is what the Dutch government says in, and the Dutch Court of Justice has also ruled like this, that it's when it's evidently informing the public, in our case patients, this will be evident that it's not advertising, but it's information. So the conclusion is that for you, for other countries, please check what your local national government has decided about this paragraph 4, article 1 of the EU guideline. So that's one thing that happened lately. The other thing that's already a few years ago, we were wondering, we started to have contact with the Dutch Institute for Human Rights, especially about anti-discrimination legislation. That's quite an interesting subject because discrimination can be in all kinds of territories, at work, with insurers, etc. And the Dutch, there in the Netherlands, I don't know in other countries, would be interesting to hear that from you. If you have an institute, a governmental institute for human rights and anti-discrimination, in the Netherlands we have, and in 2018 there was a ruling that a certain employer discriminated against a man by failing to sufficiently investigate an effective adjustment for his ADHD and his chronic sleeping problems, and then terminated the employment relationship with him. So here the employer was accused and sort of convicted of discrimination. So that's for our community, that's positive because you have something to refer to in the Netherlands. But in other cases, there was a ruling in 2011. That's always the case when you talk legally. You have to prove what you think. Only having an opinion is not enough. You have to prove what's the matter. And in this case, an employee didn't prove that the employer discriminated him. It was an ambulance driver, typically for ADHD. And what is especially interesting is this, that the employer said, and that's something really to realize, the fact that the applicant, that's the employee, has ADHD played no role, said the employer officially. However, the applicant's failure to inform the employer in time about his ADHD has been the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. So there were other issues, and then moreover, he didn't share his ADHD, and then they say that was what breached our confidence with the employee. So that is something to consider when you advise people about coming out or not coming out about your ADHD. Because if you don't give, as an employee, you don't give disclosure, that means you cannot rightfully claim adjustments or claim your protective rights, because if they don't know you have ADHD, it's hard to discriminate you on it. I'm interested what people think about it. So for the Dutch situation again, I can tell you, because in daily life I work as a coach. I coach employees for employers, and I know that HR and management are more and more really open to people with ADHD and to discuss, let's say, adjustments, reasonable adjustments or accommodations, whatever you call it. And they also see that if a person is open about his or her ADHD, that we can also work on the advantages of ADHD and get people in the right place. So more and more in the Netherlands, not every employer, but more and more employers really understand, hey, these people with ADHD, they might be very useful for the organization. And if we have some small adjustments, they can flourish. So that's the status of the Netherlands at the moment. Another example is that about insurance discrimination. That's a model of competitors, I could say. Rob Pereira, who is also present in this meeting, and we guide, coach students with their end thesis most of the time. And one that did a bachelor on law has digged into insurance companies and at least made a good publication for us, that private insurances in the Netherlands have the freedom to accept or not to accept someone for an insurance. In this case, concerning ADHD, you're talking about life insurance and occupational incapacity insurance for the self-employed. So if you are self-employed and you get ill for a longer time, you want to insure your income. And it became clear that some insurers, private insurers, impose a higher premium when ADHD, or sometimes even refuse them. So that's we are still working on that. And she also looked into, is this legally okay that there is a distinction between neurotypicals and people with ADHD in insurance matters, because making a distinction is not prohibited. Discrimination is to make a prohibited distinction, and that must be based on objectively justified reasons. And until now, what we have been digging into, there is no objectively justifiable reason to distinct purely on ADHD for an insurance. So what to do about it? She made this student, she also made recommendations for our association, Impuls and Wordblind. And her recommendation was try to lobby with the union of insurers, which we already did. Of course, try to influence your members of parliament to make good legislation. and convince insurers to collaborate with coaches for prevention of illness, etc. So another legal thing, well, it's between legislation and practice. If you use the word reasonable accommodations, that's what I noticed working in the Netherlands. If you use the word reasonable adjustments or reasonable accommodations, you already inflict the brain of the person who's listening to you with, are these adjustments reasonable? And before you know it, you're in court and having trouble and having a legal conflict. So what I promote is the word useful adjustments. When I talk to an employer together with an employee whom I am coaching, I always use the word useful adjustment. So then the discussion is this adjustment useful? Of course it's reasonable. Nobody's going to ask something unreasonable. That would be kind of silly, you know? So I promote the word useful adjustments. When we're talking legally, we of course know that that reasonable adjustment has a legal basis. So, for example, useful adjustments, what we are talking about in the Netherlands is this: in a large open office, you can use these shields of a wall of plants. And I know in the Netherlands, at least, employers are absolutely willing to talk about that. And what is also quite accepted in the Netherlands, and then I can stop my talk, otherwise it will be too long, that all these kind of accommodations or, well, little things you can organize for a person with, for an employee with ADHD. In fact, I have several cases where they are really open to, let's say, organizing a buddy, a colleague who talks to you half an hour per week, or change the job a little, that persons go out and do, let's say, account management or travel to accounts to the customer of the organization. Let's not go into the coaching part and what accommodations all are possible. But what I wanted to report to you is that it's quite well, not absolutely fantastic, but it's quite well accepted in the Netherlands. So hopefully later on we have time to discuss a bit about this. Thank you. This was my update from the Netherlands.
Thanks, Hans. I would now go ahead and tell you a little bit about Germany. Those who don't know me, I'm Miriam Bier. I'm the president of ADHD Europe, and I'm the chief executive of the German association ADHD Deutschland. Moreover, I'm a lawyer, and I'm pretty traveling around and telling people about their rights about ADHD. So, what we have in Germany, we have a patient rights law, we have problems regarding the job or your hobby, about traffic, about disability, about sports, especially with doping and travel, and insurance. Now let me see. In Germany, since 2013, we have a law, and it regulates the relation between the professional and the patient. And was very important, the first time they put a communication in a law. So there's a lot of information duties for professionals, not only in regard on the real treatment, but they have to inform about everything which is important around having a certain condition or illness, and they have to do a proper documentation. Otherwise, they can be held liable, and this gives more rights in general to patients, and I think that's helpful. This is in German. The guy comes out of the doctor's office, and the one guy says, so what about the diagnosis? And the other one says something about attention deficit, but I didn't listen closely. And I think that's also a big problem, not only in Germany, that people don't listen, and communication is a big issue, especially with doctors. So I think it's a good thing to have a law now where it says the doctor has not only to inform and explain, but also to documentate things. Now, regarding ADHD, lucky the Netherlands, in Germany, it's still a big stigma. And when you go to employers, usually they don't like to hear that you have ADHD or something like that. So, like Hans said, if you don't tell, you can't get advantages. But so far in Germany, it's better not to tell. And in fact, you don't have to tell. Of course, if you think you need whatever help, it's good to tell. Otherwise, you can't ask for useful or reasonable adjustments. But as long as you don't want to tell, you don't have to tell. And the only question employers in Germany can ask is, are you capable to do this work? And as long as you think you are capable to do the job, you don't have to tell about your ADHD and about medication. It's a little bit different if you want to work for the state as an official. There you have to disclose everything, but it's a decision on a case-by-case basis. So it's not okay to say we don't want you because you have ADHD. They have to explicitly say, because you are blah, 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 we don't think you can work as normal person at the end to your retirement. Otherwise, they have to take you. And that's the same for everything else. It's the same for army and police, but in reality, the police and the army don't really care. They do what they want, and it's hard, because you have to go to court and sue them if they don't take you for a job. I don't know about other countries, but to become a pilot with Lufthansa or whatever big company is not possible, because they say if you have ADHD and more severe, you take medication, you are not capable to do the job. And that's also decision one by one. You could sue them, but so far, nobody really did. Driving in Germany, we have a law, and in this law it says this condition or that condition doesn't give you the general aptitude to drive a car, but they don't list ADHD, they don't list really the medication. So in the end, your aptitude or you're capable to drive a car with ADHD and even with your medication, and you don't have to tell. But in reality, when you come into a police control, they handle it differently. And the police says, oh, you take legal drugs. And if you take legal drugs, you take also non-legal drugs. And they try, to give you a hassle and a problem. So even the law is different and you're allowed to drive. Better not to be in a police control because that could be different. I had no time to translate that. That's about disability. And I think it's pretty much the same they have in the Netherlands regarding what is a disability. And when you ask yourself, is ADHD and or autism a disability in regard of the law, we have a list, and there is a point 351. It talks about autism, and with autism you can be disabled from 0 to 100%. And then 352 talks about ADHD, and it says when you are under 25, usually you can get everything between 0 and 100, and afterwards it's less than being severely disabled. So the problem for an adult with ADHD, usually in Germany, they are not disabled in the sense of the law. So they can't ask for compensation in all regards because they are not disabled. Then all the small other things you may know, when you take methylphenidate or amphetamine, that's regarded as a doping stuff. So when you're going for whatever sports thing, you have to ask the International Anti-Doping, WADA, for extra permission to perform. And at the Olympics, you are not allowed to take anything like methylphenidate or amphetamine. When you travel with this medication, when you're in the Schengen round, so it's EU more or less, there's a special form in Germany the doctor has to fill out, and you have to go to authorities, pay some money, and then you can travel. Be aware, Great Britain left the EU, so if you are traveling to the island, to Great Britain, you have to have extra paperwork, and you have to have 2 different papers if you go by car from Germany, because you pass by the Netherlands or Belgium, and if you fly, it's only 1. And I really tell people in Germany, if they go abroad to countries like Thailand or other countries with severe drug laws, rather contact before the embassy to figure out what you need. And regarding insurance, it's the same like in the Netherlands. The insurance companies are free to conclude a contract or deny. And like Hans said, it's not discriminating if you say there's a certain reason with more risk. And in Germany, they say with ADHD, you are more prone to have accidents. And they take all the nice studies we have regarding untreated ADHD, and they use that as a reason to take higher insurance fees or just to deny. So that's something I think we really can work on an EU level, because like Hans said, it's not a real thing to say ADHD is really a reason not to give you an insurance. So that was a fast run to Germany to give you an idea what things you can talk about. And I think now we are interested what's going on in other countries, and to make it a little bit more, easy, I would go and start with the things we addressed already and say, so what do you say about this and that? And we go through the different types of possible discrimination and problems. And then we come to subjects we didn't mention, and you can tell us, because I learned that Iceland has some problems I never heard of before. So I think there are maybe some things you would like to share with us where we had no clue that you can have discrimination. So I think it's pretty easy maybe to start with driving and ADHD. Is there a country around here? Please put your cameras on. That's easier to see you then, especially when we're talking to each other, and we are only 20, so we can see each other. So we have problems in Germany, even we have the right laws. I know we are having problems in the north. Maybe you want to share your experience with driving with ADHD and or medication. I see Letizia shared with us in the chat. I know about a case about amphetamine medication, driving a car, and problem with the car insurance. No, not insured, so that's not good. Looking around, no problems in other countries with driving and ADHD. Hans, we have to move.
Yeah. Well,
hello,
hello?
Hello, sorry.
Yeah.
Just an intervention. I know that in Italy, if the methylphenidate, Ritalin, is included in something that is supposed not to allow you to drive, but really the law is not enforced. So it's kind of nobody has been prohibited to drive before they take this medication.
Oh.
At least they told me.
And about dexamphetamine, do you know that, Daniele?
In Italy, only Ritalin, and another principle, the amphetamine are not allowed, are not prescribable. So it's not, there is a very poor choice of drug related to ADHD.
Oh, okay.
So no medication, then no problem with driving, but you can't receive the medication, that's even worse.
Yeah, in Italy, the choice is only, and it's very difficult to be prescribed if you are an adult that is has not been diagnosticated when you were when you are a teenager. If you are an adult diagnosticated, it's very, very, very difficult to obtain prescription. There is not a real awareness about this problem. You need to have a specialized center that prescribe this kind of drugs, or you can go some kind of private doctor. That is, and also you have to pay for it. You can even if it's prescribed, you can't you can just pay, you just be have a free of charge on the national health system.
Okay. Yeah, what the problem is with medication and driving is that when you were really thinking of argumentations why medication is so good for ADHD and driving, then you have to tell around that people with ADHD without medication cannot drive because they make too much accident. And nobody's going to say that in the open. So it's a bit hard to promote medication for driving, because when you promote it, you will use argumentations that include that without medication, the driving isn't, well, at least not so good. So that's a bit of a double bind we have around medication and driving. And anyways, Rob Pereira, we do have experience with dexamphetamine and driving in the Netherlands. Is it going a bit better already, or are we still in the misère?
No, it's not going better, but in practice there are not very many problems. So if you take a normal dose of your dexamphetamine and you have a prescription with you and you make no accident, then it's okay. But if you have an accident, for example, they can check your drugs with a test with saliva, and when it's present, they have to measure it in your blood, and then they say it's more or less than 50 milligrams per liter, and that's okay or not okay. But actually, that's not the real. It's not the real border. Letitia has some experience.
Yeah, it's true, but I'm just telling you something else. The 50 milligram is a mistake. It's a big mistake.
Of
it's
whom?
About 50 micrograms.
Okay.
Per liter.
In your blood?
In your blood.
Oh, okay.
50 microgram, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference, because there is no chance that when you use this medication, you will be tested. You never get under the what we call border value. Never. The border value of we tell it grenswaarde is made so that they only can find it in your blood. If they can find it, you're at the wrong side of the border.
Threshold, of the threshold.
Yes.
No, we are going to test it in the near future with some people who have ADHD and dexamphetamine, and then we can test it beforehand, because not everybody is going over this 50 microgram border.
Yep.
Okay.
No.
That's better in Germany, because they really, when they test somebody, they really exactly look what's in the blood, and if it's, matching the prescription, and as long as it's matching, it's fine. But unfortunately, a lot of people think it's a good idea to put a little bit, different things also into their bodies, and moreover, sometimes don't take it exactly as prescribed, but think it's better to use some more or in a different way, and then it's not matching, and then you have big trouble.
But there's no linear hoe zeg je dat ook weer?
Correlation.
A correlation between the dose and the blood level. So that's always the problem. It's not linear.
I have no clue. I'm not a medical doctor, but as far as I got to know, it's not a problem if you take your medication the way you should take it, so as it's prescribed, because they know how to figure that out with the blood. But the problem is really if somebody is not, really sticking to the prescription. Mm-hmm. Because in Germany, it's legal in the end if you take it as prescribed, But as in the minute you take something else, no matter if it's some more methylphenidate or a little bit else, or even alcohol, then it's going to be a problem.
Or cannabis, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have no other people who can share stories, I would go ahead with a different subject.
Yes, please.
Sorry, just one thing. I just wanted to tell you that maybe you know already, but I know that in Canada, for example, people who are diagnosed with ADHD must have during their driving the medicine. If they are, if they are blocked by a policeman and they didn't have taken the medicine, you cannot drive when you are diagnosed. You cannot drive without taking medicine in Canada. So it is exactly the contrary.
Yeah.
What we have in our Europe.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, but when you go for diagnosis, do you only get the diagnosis if you also need medication, or what does the professional say? Because it makes no sense to get a diagnosis, but it's not severe enough to take medication, and then people would not go for a diagnosis because they have to fear that they have to take medication even they don't need it. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, sure. It's very complicated. We have someone in from Australia, Paul Schwert. Maybe when you feel up to it, you can share the Australian situation with us, if that's Paul. Yeah.
Yes. Good morning.
Well, that's your country is morning. We are in the
upside
evening
down.
No problem. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. We have different laws and regulations for each state or province, and there is no policy, law, or regulation other than if medication is prescribed and taken correctly. There is no actual enforcement unless the blood levels are high.
Okay.
But it is a problem here in Australia.
Then what is the problem?
Uncertainty in law and regulation.
Yeah. It looks like Europe, and we have different countries with different regulations. So it's complicated to make an inventory of how is the regulation in all these countries. So hopefully we do have a European regulation where I pointed it about medication and making propaganda for it. So yeah, maybe another subject, Miriam.
Yes, I think we maybe can all agree on the insurance issue. Is there a country without any problems to get a, how do you call it, life insurance or a work disability insurance? Because I think that's it's similar for Germany and the Netherlands, and I would assume it's the same in other countries.
Does anybody know of people who are refused based on their ADHD? In the Netherlands, it did happen, just bluntly, in your face. Check ADHD on your registration form and sorry, we don't accept you. So we were protesting against it, and we'll try to sue them, but it takes time.
Yeah. Well, then I assume we will check. Yeah, Pavlina.
Hi, everyone. I would share my personal experience for my son, which is 13, and I was suggested to make a life insurance. So the lawyer said, do not mention at all. If you just mention any disability that he has, My name is Bulgarian, but I am living in Italy.
Oh.
So I didn't say anything to make an insurance for the guy. This is my experience that I wanted to share with you.
But the problem, at least in Germany, is if you don't tell the truth, you know, they ask you about your history.
Exactly. So I didn't. So I have all the papers by the authority now for his condition, but I couldn't share the documents with the insurance company because there is no law, there is no regulation, and the guy is at school, in a mid-school, so that means accidents happen very often at home also.
Yeah.
And this is a big problem, not telling the truth.
Yes. And like in Germany, I know a case where somebody didn't tell the insurance, but they got to know about it, and he was sued in court for fraud because he didn't tell the truth. And then you are not only losing, you know, what you paid for the insurance, but also
I'm frightened about that situation. Yeah. Yes, I'm frightened about that situation. So I'm thinking about renewing what I would say, what I should do, because now I'm more informed with our association here in Italy. So the situation is not clear. It's just not clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pavlina. Rob.
We had recently we had a case of a person who had ADHD, but he outgrew it, and still the company didn't want him to be a member of their insurance. And then we de-ADHD'd him, so we deleted the diagnosis officially, and then he could have his insurance.
Oh.
So you can do something like that, because in Germany, they asked you for the 5 to 10 years which passed. So if, in case you had the diagnosis in between the last 5 or 10 years, you have to tell them.
Yeah, and then you can also take the diagnosis away if you don't have any disabilities anymore.
Yeah. If you don't have any functioning problems, you may have it in your genes, but it's not
But
ADHD.
In Germany, you really have to wait then 5 years before, you know, you can apply without telling them. Even if, you know, if you're not in treatment or seeing a doctor anymore, you have to wait the 5 years. So.
Okay.
Also, this is, as we notice now, a very complicated legal problem. And so we are happy that we have started, well, we are still starting it up, but with a legal committee within ADHD Europe that can sort of study or make an inventory, or at least pass on experiences, hopefully good practices where people succeeded. And we might even in the future find fundings to go to the European court if there is a real good case, but you know that's very expensive and complicated. But at least we have this small committee who, from a few members of ADHD Europe, who try to dig into all kinds of legal stuff.
Frau Kökler.
Yeah. Also, with my sons, I made the experience that in one case, he had a diagnosis when he was 6 or 7. And when he had passed his education with success, the insurance said, okay, it doesn't bother us anymore. And with the other son who has more problems, he got some kind of insurance. They said he would get an insurance because he had also finished an education, but everything which is concerning to psychological problems is excluded. So it makes no sense.
Yeah. And it's the theoretical nice thing is you can, of course, do a deal with an insurance. You can try to pay more or get exemptions, but in the end, they always want to earn money and they are not interested in personal stories. And no matter if you have cancer or ADHD or anything else in Germany, when you have something chronic, they try not to insure you and find a lot of good or bad reasons in studies and say, see, the risk is bigger, therefore we need more money, or we don't even take you at all.
But I think it was interesting that insurance are looking if somebody has a completed education.
Yeah.
That's for them it's important.
Yeah, sure. You know, it's quite complicated, because when you happen to be working in an insurance company, you're going to calculate, and then you say, well, we have to earn money, we can't go broke, we have to pay all these claims, and then they calculate, ADHD is a risk, okay, don't do ADHD. So in itself, it sounds reasonable, but in the end, when you talk about with an insurer and who first excludes all the risks, then there's no risk, so there's no insurance. So in fact, it's stupid, but it sounds reasonable, but it isn't. And that's because insurers are more and more commercial companies, and not like in the old days, a collective working together for people who help each other when there's a problem. So no solidarity. There's no solidarity at all. And that's the new development is, I don't know if any other countries know it. The new development, I only know the Dutch word, broodfondsen. So people who organize an insurance themselves amongst each other. As soon as you have 1,000 people, you can put money in this budget, in this fund, and then you are a sort of an insurance, and they call it, let's say, a working fund, a bread fund, so that when something happens to you, you at least have bread to eat. So that's why the name bread fund. And that will be the future, that insurers who are only commercial and exclude any risk and then let you pay for no risk, that's a bit, well, weird, you know. And in the Netherlands, we are talking with the union of insurers to convince them that they are, well, they're not okay, let's say, yeah, from a human rights perspective. Important subject, work in progress.
And in fact, Hans, I think that's good to go to the next subject you already mentioned, talking about ADHD work and disability, because I think that's a huge difference. I think stigma we have everywhere in the European Union. Nobody should take a sheet of paper says, I have ADHD, do you want me as an employee? I don't think so far a lot of them from the employers are thrilled to take people with ADHD. But about legal rights, what about disability? Is ADHD for adults recognized in your countries as a disability? I'm sure in Italy it's not, because
No, but I do remember from Italy, I don't know if Monica knows that, in Italy, the dyslexia network succeeded to get dyslexia recognized in the law as a disability. Legally, that's a bit stupid to put all disabilities in the law.
Exactly.
Do you know it from Italy?
Yeah, for dyslexia, which is with the dyslexia with the other disabilities of
Autism.
Autism, but also there is a
for master dyspraxia, what's the name?
No, dyscalculia.
Dyscalculia, that was the one. Thanks.
Exactly, yeah, but with the other ones on the sides. So we have a law in Italy for those. But because for ADHD we don't have nothing, we don't have no, so we don't have nothing that can help us to be covered in some ways. So if you apply for a job, you normally you don't say I've got a ADHD diagnosis. So it's better to hide.
In our country, some people say dyslexia is an ability.
Yeah.
Okay, coming back to ADHD, Carola, you wanted to say something.
Please unmute yourself, Carola Siegel.
Okay, now?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm from Austria. Here, adults, severe cases can get a degree of disability, but usually it's too small to serve for anything. Only thing you can do is when you apply for a job, that you tell about your degree of disability and say that so your boss can get help from the state because he takes a disabled person. But usually having a degree of disability is a disadvantage unless you have more than 50 degrees. And you get some 20 or 30 with ADHD, even if you have severe problems in everyday life.
Thanks, Carola.
How's Greece about the disability side? Christina.
Yes. There are some provisions in the in law that employers, they get some aid or some bonuses when they employ people with certain disabilities. I don't know if ADHD is within these disabilities, but certainly it is recognized in up to the age of 18 as a disability, and the state offers extra helping hand to parents with children with ADHD. They offer supportive education, somebody to assist the child into their learning, into their staying in the classroom. And they also found some in the afternoons they go to special centers for dyslexia or dyscalculia or all these difficulties, the children to be helped and cope with it. Now, I don't know something more to tell you for sure. I'm not very certain in my answer, so I would opt to refrain for something that might be so or not so.
What's about stigma? Despite talk about a disability, at least in Germany we encounter it's a lot of stigma when you tell employees, oh, I have ADHD, something like that. Is there any country where you would say, oh, like Hans said, it's also ability and strength, and companies who appreciate to get people with the strength? Or in your country, like in Germany, it's better not to tell people? Letizia.
I don't have any ideas about this. So I mute again.
Here in Greece, it is a debate between ADHDers whether they should reveal and inform the employers of their ADHD or not. And there is not a concrete policy regarding this. It is a jagged, how we say this knife with the double blades. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
I would like to mention something that you said, Hans, previously regarding the insurance companies. I totally agree with what you said, that there is no solidarity and it is more a commercial business. And the proof of that is that you can see that almost all insurance companies, they have unified more or less their clauses.
Yep.
So there are no very audacious insurance companies that they would go out of the box and leave the safety of the steady income of the premiums.
Yeah, sure. But in time, people will take matters into their own hands, and consumers are more and more being going for their rights and organizing things themselves. By the way, I think what Paul Wert from Australia said, please can you say it aloud, Paul, because that's interesting, the conflict between destigmatization and getting recognized as a disability. That's a bit of a, well, a kind of conflict.
Yes, Hans, you've said it very well there. ADHD in Australia was removed from the Disability Discrimination Act about 8 years ago, but all other disabilities have been retained in the Act. Why was it removed? I can't tell you for certain, but I've been told it was in an attempt to destigmatize ADHD, and therefore it had an unintended consequence.
Yeah.
And therefore today we are trying to reinstate ADHD or the impairment of ADHD back into the Act. So there was that conflict.
Yep,
so
sure.
Unintended good meaning, well-meaning actions can have unintended consequences.
Yep. I think
that's interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And that's exactly the conflict. So thank you for sharing this with us, because this being it a stigma, let me take you back to what I quoted, the definition of, let me take you back to that. The definition of a person with a disability is those who have long-term physical, that's the brain, or mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. This means that it's not very wise to get certain diagnoses in the legislation. I think it's better. This is really about the legal side of constructing legislations to put the general definition, which is already in the UN treaty of a disability. So that's a disability. So if you have ADHD or ABC or XYZ, if you are a person with a physical or mental, etc., problem, like I just quoted, then it is a disability. If you can prove that with a doctor and a psychiatrist and maybe your employer or whatever, then you can go to the European Court of Justice, where the breach of human rights are handled. I know that's very complicated, costs a lot of money, but may you perhaps meet a rich family with a son with ADHD and he is discriminated, ask the father, hey man, let's go to court, let's have fun and go to, what is it, Strasbourg.
Like you said, lawyers like to do that, other people don't.
Yeah, I know, of course.
Anyhow,
of course.
Pavlina, you wanted to say something.
Thank you. I just wanted to share another experience here in one of the regions in Italy. I know adults that has disability recognition with the comorbidities, with the differences of the separate, how do you say, with the differences of the diagnosis, like anxious or bipolar or depression. So they have recognition for those, but they have to don't say or not saying about they cannot speak about ADHD.
Oh, yeah.
Because as Paul, I think was his name, said, the stigma is everywhere. Basically, you grow up and you don't have clear ADHD. You become something else. No, you develop. You mutate. You. This is according to some of the psychiatrists. No, for adults. I personally know people with disability, with a comorbidities, but no, because of the ADHD.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. By the way, I see that Vilhelmur Helmarsson, sorry if I pronounce it right, is in the room. So the president of the Icelandic Association, am I right? Vilhelmur, are you there? Oh, I see VH. So,
well, maybe go on, and he jumps on the next subject, because I think we went through the pretty much common things like jobs, driving, insurance, and disability. Now it's up to you to tell us what else in your countries is maybe causing problems we didn't mention before, because I think what we mentioned is pretty common in all countries, more or less. It's more recognized in the Netherlands and in Germany than in Italy or in Greece, but we are facing in different degrees all the same problems, stigmatization and discrimination. But I think, as far as I know, there are still some other issues in some countries, so I would like to jump on that one, or maybe we get some ideas about that in Australia with Paul.
I think we are suffering similar issues that you in Europe are also suffering. But I have to admit that there is quite a difference in our legislation and in our laws. We are based on common law, and in Europe you are based on civil law. So that does not provide a good comparison in terms of legislation.
Okay, now I see Wilhelm. Sorry, I work on your name, but you joined us, and you know we worked through the common subjects. I don't know if you could listen already. So we talked about driving, we talked about the workplace, we talked about insurance, a little bit doping and traveling. But as I understood when talking to Hannah when I met him, you have some more issues in Iceland. I was very surprised to hear, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that when you have ADHD, you have problems to go and give, how do you call that, eggs or for fertilization for other people when you have ADHD. Is that true?
Please unmute Vilhelmur.
Now you can hear me.
Yeah.
Sorry about the problems. Somebody else is connecting on my device next door. That's what you saw earlier, and kept stealing my Bluetooth headphones. Yes, we have seen. Well, we got sent a case regarding egg donor, sort of this sort of fertilization center, and apparently you're not allowed to donate an egg if you have ADHD. We've only just started to look into it, so we'll have to wait and see. Apart from that, yes, we have the similar problems like with driving. It's not such a big problem anymore with methylphenidate, so Ritalin, Concerta, etc. As long as there's nothing else in the case, and as long as the person is tested with what is to be expected of the dose for that day, it will not usually not reach the courts. But we are seeing an influx regarding L1s and attentin, so both base themselves on oh, what are they called? Amphetamine substance. Probably the biggest case we've sort of turned around was the police academy. So we of course don't have an army, but I'd say about 4 years ago, the police academy here was sort of changing their rules very oddly. And after the first year, before the cadets could go to be trained on the grounds, after 1 year of studying, they were suddenly being disqualified, even if they just had an ADHD diagnosis. Now, we managed to sort of change that, but a year later, they came out with new rules, which were even worse. So what we did, rather than just shouting about in media, we also went in, spoke to them, and we came to the consensus that we explained to them that ADHD as such is not really the problem, but if you see some behavioral disorders and stuff, that's a more likely sort of thing to look for rather than ADHD or just ADHD. At that time, they were basing their new rules on the regulations in Scandinavia, mostly Norwegians, so both army and police, but a mixture of them all. And that supposedly was based on some scientific academic research. We never saw those research papers, we just kept asking. Eventually, by joining up with them, by sending in people, psychologists, psychiatrists, we sort of turned the case. It needed another sort of push about a year ago. But what I'm told now, I haven't got it confirmed. I'm actually told that the Scandinavian authorities are now looking towards how we are doing it in Iceland. So it might mean change their nature.
Oh, that's quite something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took a few years.
Took a few years, yeah. So, but maybe others can profit from your experience, yeah. What you achieved. That would be wonderful.
Most definitely.
But so maybe that's an idea to organize as ADHD Europe models of good practice and share them with the world or amongst each other. We'll make a note of that. Models of good practice is an accepted way of organizing it. It's work because you have to describe the problem and what did you do, etc. Yeah. But in 2-pager about what did, in this case, Iceland do, what was the problem, how did you succeed, it would be wonderful to share it.
I think so.
Yeah.
And there are also, insanely simple things like the fact that during the last 2 years, the police academy has been moved to a university up north. So most of the learning, specifically for the first year, is distant learning. That also meant that the teachers and the people around the school didn't meet the students, at least not on regular grounds. So they had less information to base their evaluation on. And then, just to point out those simple things.
Yeah.
And as for the driving and stuff, we know, I mean, I speak to a lot of police people specifically regarding well-known methylphenidate. We know most police people are knowledgeable about this, but less knowledgeable about the new medication like L1s and what is it called? Attentin. But they are willing to work with us. Maybe they can't do it in public, but we are actually going to sort of go a side way. There is a sort of what do you call it? The travel committee that sort of handles all kind of public announcements. They are going to work with us and the police to create some information booklets, and that's definitely something we can then pass on.
Oh, great. Maybe if you find somewhere in the network of the police authorities, management, we can do a webinar on that. Interview them, how they see it, and how they developed their opinion about it, etc. That would be wonderful.
You could be anonymous, so nobody has to. I think it's still a problem maybe to be there in person with your name on it, but if somebody wants to be behind the screen, we would also appreciate that and take somebody for a webinar.
Yeah, sure.
We might actually need to do it via the traffic authority, because in public, policemen, specifically high up, are very wary or aware of sort of not saying things too clearly, because it's a legal matter. It has to be correct.
Yeah, sure. But anyways,
it could be organized once we have something.
Yeah, you're just making me enthusiastic about it. So. Don't run too fast. Okay, step by step. I know.
We can maybe do it sooner on the police academy.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Danielle, did you raise your hand? You disappeared now in the dark of Italy.
We can't hear you.
Danielle, can you hear us?
No.
He's working on his phone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, okay. Now we can.
Okay, no, just the raised hand was a mistake. I think that I am not enough experience as ADHD. First of all,
can you speak a little bit louder, please? It's very, very like far away.
Sorry, I say that I was saying I am not have enough experience with HIFA, so I can give any official opinion about the problem that we are facing. But one thing that I think that especially as concern people with HD adults, I think that the main problem is that it's not really a knowledge, is not really known. So there is maybe less discrimination because nobody knowing about it, even though people can have a significant problem in their daily life. But I think now we have a big problem of awareness, even in authorities, doctors, even as the other person from it was saying, there is a big problem of how to be diagnosticated by a doctor. Even a psychiatrist is not, sometimes he doesn't really know about ADHD, even there is a lot of information abroad. So I think there are kind of slightly different problem because of this fact. Thank you.
I'd say, I mean, one thing that benefits us over here, I mean, I got my diagnosis 21 years ago. I came on board with the ADHD Society 10 years ago. At that time, that we were starting to it was a 20-year plan, and we have the way through to make the subjects known, to make people understand what's going on, and we are actually getting a lot of feedback now after 10 years. So we have a lot of visibility as an association, and those things to change the discourse, to change the discussions, just takes a lot of time, and you always start here with yourself. I've got ADHD. There's nothing wrong with my brain. It just works this way, not the other way, and then carry on talking about it, positive waves, etc. And it just takes a lot of time.
Definitely true. Yes. You know, we have the subject now in Germany for 40 years. We started as, you know, only children had ADHD, and it was gone by 18. That was a fun because with 18, no health insurance paid for the medication, because I said it's disappearing when you turn 18. And it took us, I think, 10 years to convince them, of course, together with the pharmaceutical companies who asked for the reimbursement, to convince insurance to pay for it. So now we are, I think, pretty good in Germany, having different medication paid by public health insurance. And I know, like Italy, there is nearly nothing, same in France. So it's a long way. And I think that's the reason to meet here and exchange information. And like Hans said, we should really collect best practice and also tell people where they should be aware. And so I think that's kind of a start this evening to start with exchanging and collecting information and go on with a small subgroup to proceed further with this.
Miriam, I just asked Carola from Malta if there is an update from Malta about legal matters, maybe a short one about discrimination, insurance problems, or whatever that you know of.
Yes, hi everyone. Well, actually, I'd just like to mention again that the insurance systems are so different in all the different countries in all the European area, because here we don't have a compulsory insurance that we need to pay, so it goes automatically from your taxes, and so with the health insurance, really. Most people for ADHD, especially youths, and then adults are a bit more wishy-washy. They get their complete medication refunded by the government system. They don't need to pay anything, not even to the pharmacy, and only to the doctor if they go get a private prescription. So that is something that is a bit different compared to, I think, the Netherlands and other places. And therefore, we don't really have private health insurance. You mainly get that if you're a foreigner working for, you know, a bigger company. And then, like, for instance, my husband works in the hotel industry, so he was offered an insurance. And then you have to declare your illnesses, and they automatically exclude them. So it's a very different system from abroad. So if you actually admit to having some kind of a diagnosis, in my case, I have problems with my thyroid, that is automatically completely excluded, and you were never going to get any refund for any medication anyway. So very different system. Then considering other insurances, it's not very popular here. Like in Holland, I know I would have like an indemnity insurance in case I bump into someone, even if it's on the road, it's very cheap. Here we don't use it. But when we as a voluntary organization host events where there are children with ADHD, we ask insurance companies to either sponsor us or to give us some competitive quotes. And those sums are normally a bit like, my gosh, just for an event to have this kind of insurance. But we all know that ADHD kids are a bit more accident prone, so we like to have something to cover us. At the moment, regarding legislation, I looked into the driving license situation and medication and driving license. I think here, as long as you just don't mention it, you're okay. And if you do get into an accident and you can show that you were taking this medication and it was prescribed to you, you shouldn't have a major problem. But you should not go offering these details as you apply to get your driving license. So it is a matter of, like the other lady was saying, like, maybe you should just hush, and only if you have to show the evidence, and if you can prove that it was taken according to prescription, you'll be all right. Fingers crossed. And then, of course, another big difference is that we only have very few medications here in Malta, being a small island. So when I hear the names of other non-stimulants and things that are related to amphetamines, we don't even have those on the island. So there's a big lack of experience with that, and therefore no legislation regarding that. But I dread the day that we have somebody from Iceland, Sweden, who has taken their own medication with them, who gets involved in, for instance, a traffic accident while on some of these medications, and then we will have a media spectacle, because then it falls outside of the usual thing. What I heard today that my colleagues were busy with were discussing with the medical department the rights of patients to have access to more medication. So I feel that for us, that is somewhere legally that we are trying to stand up for our rights. We are kind of considered as a disability, but we're normally just abandoned by everybody, including the dyslexia group. They just go like, oh, yeah, ADHD, it's similar to dyslexia, isn't it? Yeah. And that's it. We hardly do anything together. It's unfortunate. Anyway, that's a little update from Malta. Thank you.
Thanks, Carola. Well, anything else? Wilhelm, I'm sorry, I will learn your name, someone. Wilhelm, do you want to add something because you put up your hand?
Originally put on my hand because we noticed that Facebook was down in Iceland. I believe that is quite sort of system-wide, probably in Europe. So a lot of people trying to watch this on Facebook or whatever account. But regarding what Ursula was saying, if you look at the insurance companies and you don't tell, and something happens and that does pop up, you actually sort of invalid your insurance. If the police stops you, and if they see some reason to actually do a blood test or whatever, and this kind of medication or drugs pop up, you may be in worse situations than before. However, as things are supposed to be handled here, you should not need to have a doctor's letter, or let alone the official document that says that I am allowed to get this medication and it's being subsidized by the state. Nobody should be walking around with that in their pockets. And in a police investigation has to be formally asked for and entered. Those things take time. Something else you said there? No, I can't remember. No, it's gone.
Comes back this night when you're in bed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well,
anything else somebody would like to address?
Traveling medication.
Yeah, we talked about that, Carola, before you popped in. I said, I told everybody, remember, Great Britain is not EU anymore. So I had the case in Germany. I told somebody, you need different paperwork now, and you need the old paperwork if you pass through the other countries and then enter Great Britain, you need something else. So yes, and of course, not EU.
No. I'm not just read yesterday that Icelandic students going to UK, they have to insure themselves for something like 1,500 euros. But traveling with medication, as long as the country that you're entering doesn't forbid them completely, it shouldn't be a huge problem. But the biggest obstacle is actually international laws on flights. Because if you read them and if you interpret them very strictly, you could say that you're allowed to have medication with you that lasts the flight, not the total traveling time. So there are a lot of pitfalls there.
I think it's always good to check, especially when you go to countries with strict laws regarding drugs and else, because otherwise you may end someplace else than in your hotel and not the beach. So that's always, and you should really consider if you need medication when going on vacation. And what we also said, we are connected very well. Sometimes it's easier to get only a letter from your doctor with a diagnosis and treatment, but no medication, and you travel and then you find a doctor in the country. You figure that out sometimes with South or Middle America, that's easier. And of course, in the USA, it's the easiest way to go to a doctor there instead of trying to bring your medication over. So.
If you don't mind, I'll jump in with one more thing, because recently we had an exchange student from the Netherlands come over, And Dr. Rob told me about this young lady, and I straight away said, listen here, things are organized differently. If she's going to be wanting ADHD medication, she has to bring it with her for the whole duration, whether it's 2 months or 6 months, which I think they do provide in the Netherlands. I don't know if for ADHD medication per se, as 6 months ahead. But it would have been so hard for her to be able to access any local ADHD medication. And I think this is something we still really have to work on within Europe, between our countries, something like cross-border prescriptions, I was calling it, because it makes it so hard for us. How could we, if we're exchange students or students abroad for a year, how do we cater for these people? And we want to be Europeans. We have to have a system that can exchange medication as well.
Yeah, sure.
I think as for students, as long as you're within the EU or the economy zone, what happens is that you should never have to take 6 months of medication with you. What should happen is that within a month or two, as a student, you are sort of allowed into that country's health system, and that should take over. But that's not working very well. And cross-border prescriptions, we had to change the regulation about 2 years ago, and there are faults in it. For example, that they will not accept a prescription from a foreign doctor. A local doctor can actually look at it, prescribe it, but it'll have a special permission, and you pay full price for it, regardless of being insured within the EU or whatever. So there's a lot of strange things that should be similar in all those countries.
But as long as we don't have this regulation, I think it's best to check in advance, which is, of course, a big problem when you have ADHD, because you do a lot of things last minute. I always tell people in Germany who think about going abroad for a longer time, the first thing before getting a flight, before getting accommodation, check on the medication. If you, rather have to take it with you or find a way to, to go back and forth. I lived in Hungary for a year. I drove to Germany from time to time to get the medication for the children, because you couldn't get anything in Hungary. And it's also interesting, in Denmark, in the chat, it's Johanna wrote, in Denmark, doctors told me it might be a good idea to have my medicine card or my package from Elvanse when driving a car. So if I would be stopped by the police, it would save me for some trouble, because I could show them I was allowed to have amphetamine in the blood due to medication. Although it's not illegal for me to have documentation on me. Yes, I thought that would be the same in Germany, but we figured out the police rather says, oh, you take drugs, it's legal, but you also take illegal drugs. So rather, don't talk about it, try to avoid any police controls.
Yeah,
I told people that's the best way. You shouldn't have a mess car, when they look into your car and it looks like a trash bin, you are more prone to be asked for an alcohol test and else.
Yeah.
And even when you don't have to permit them, you don't have to do the alcohol test, you don't have to do the drug test, then they have to write a report that they think you are strange. Then they can take you to a doctor, and then they can take the blood test. And usually they don't hassle in a normal control for that. So they say, go away, because otherwise you may get in trouble until, of course, you prove that everything is fine, but you're in the hassle of this whole system thing. And that's a problem. And we have laws, but the police is not interested that we have the laws. I think, they are the police, and it is more a German structural police problem than a legal problem. But anyhow. Okay, it's 9:30 German Netherlands time.
I would like to share some information about the next webinars we are organizing, if you allow me, Miriam.
Yeah, go ahead.
This was today, and we loved it, didn't we, Miriam? It was wonderful, yeah. And then we have the next one. That is Tuesday the 12th. This is about science, and it's vice versa, how science can help you and how you can help science. So typically something for members of ADHD Europe with Dr. Jeanette Mostert from the University of Nijmegen and a PhD, Daner, will be talking about all kinds of projects where we also participate in. Miriam knows a lot about that also. Then Wednesday the 20th, we have Dora and Sandra about women and health and the upcoming survey they will talk about and all kinds of stuff. Also scientific news on ADHD and women. By the way, for this one, you can use the link to, so next Tuesday at 1800 hours, you just can use the link you already used today. But for the 20th, you need to register and you will receive information. If you email us, we will send you the information because colleague Viljo will make a registration link. This will be a real webinar. This is a Zoom meeting today, but the number 3 and 4 are webinars. And the 4th will be Blandine French, who will be talking about the toolbox that she made for it. Originally, it was for GPs, for family doctors, but now for coaches and psychologists, a toolbox about treatment of ADHD. Very interesting. Please read the invitation. So this was the advertising for the other webinars.
Thanks, Hans, for taking care. We have to apologize. It's kind of a little bit bumpy start for the awareness months, but due to say this usually unforeseen circumstances with somebody being ill and some other issues was like a little bit low cost, but I really appreciate that so many people joined us and I think it was pretty interesting and it will be the start, not the end, to look more into the different legal systems and problems in all our countries. And we already kind of formed an informal little subgroup, but everybody who's interested in the subject, feel free to contact us and say, hey, I would like to join. And moreover, I have to address for our members, we will start another legal discussion about the makeover of our statutes. You will get a mail about that soon. So those of you who are eager to work on legal issues, feel free, there are things to come. Hans, you want to say the last words?
No, well, thank you very much, everybody. It's been a lot of work to prepare, but this makes my day. I'm very happy to have so much input from all countries, even from Australia. So
yeah, that's wonderful.
That's
upside
really
down.
Yeah, wonderful. So see you next week.
Thank
Perfect.
you very
Thanks.
much.
Have a nice evening and see you someone soon. Bye.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
a lot.
Thank you.
Very, very
Bye.
interesting.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye bye.